Hi, everyone. I'm Karin Bertozzi, and I'm here with Think Aorta, Think Family, and I am here to share my aortic aneurysm and dissection story with you. About 8.5 years ago, I fainted in a grocery store. I thought it was due to hunger, really. I thought that I just had waited too long to eat, and I was concerned about sort of making a big scene and cracking my head open, and I got myself down to the floor. I woke up 4 days later in the ICU, and I was being told by my surgeon, my thoracic cardiovascular surgeon, and my husband that I had suffered an aortic aneurysm with dissection. And didn't really know exactly what that meant, but I learned very quickly what was going on. I had an aortic repair. My arch was replaced. I have a Dacron graft like so many of us do. The dissection that went beyond the graft was medically managed. I spent 18 days in the ICU after a 12-hour emergent open heart surgery. I was fortunate enough that when I fainted, I was 7 traffic lights away from a Johns Hopkins facility where they offered great care affiliated with the NIH as well. I'm here in the Washington, D.C. area. I left the hospital on 18 prescribed medications, and of course, it was a whole new world. Not only did I have the aneurysm and dissection, I had pacing issues after my surgery. So 2 weeks after my initial surgery, a dual lead pacemaker went in. I was in the junctional rhythm, and I had multiple cardioversions, and we were not able to get this back into rhythm, back into sinus rhythm. And so the pacemaker went in on Halloween, and I remember my surgeon was concerned that I was going to have another scar. And I just thought to myself, do you have any idea what's going on underneath this hospital gown? And it was perfect for Halloween with, one more scar like Frankenstein or whatever. But I went home, and that's sort of how my journey started. My surgeon felt as though it had to be something genetic. As I was 46 years old, I worked in fitness. I had never had high blood pressure or high cholesterol. My numbers, everything was very good. My diet was pretty good, not perfect, but pretty good. And for all intent and purposes, I was, a very fit individual. And so he knew there had to be something genetic going on. And so I dug in a little bit deeper into my family history, and I knew my paternal grandfather had died early of a cardiac event. And fortunately for me and my family, I guess, an autopsy had been done. And it showed he was not feeling that great for a couple days. He went to bed early one night. He was 53, and he didn't wake up. He had an aortic aneurysm, dissecting aortic aneurysm in his sleep. And so when we saw that, we knew that there was something sort of sinister at work in our family. My father had an abdominal aneurysm, but he actually was battling cancer, and so his cancer care took over any concerns with the aneurysm. And again, his was in his belly and not in the root or in the arch, like so many of us. My event was in October. 2 months after, in December, my 3 siblings, all older brothers, they were all scanned. They had echoes by their cardiologists, and they had a couple of them went on to have CT scans as well. All of them had aneurysms, aortic root aneurysms. We're a tricuspid valve family, so that's a healthy valve. That's a normal valve. If you have a bicuspid valve, two flaps, you tend to it tends to be a little bit of a precursor or just a heightened situation that has to be watched, because there is a propensity to sort of develop aneurysms. But anyway, my point is that our valves were perfect, but for some reason, all 4 of us, me and my 3 older brothers, all 4 of us had aneurysms. And I, of course, had just been through this emergent event and was on the road to healing and recovery and in a lot of shock and just, never having heard of this before, and just my children were fairly young at the time. I think my youngest was 7, so my kids were like 7, 9, and 15 or something like that. But my brothers, they all came back with aneurysms at their aortic root. 2 of the brothers went on to have elective surgeries. They're in a different state, but they had what's called an elephant trunk procedure. So same sort of deal. They had their aortic valves replaced, and then they had aortic grafts put in, the same Dacron graft that I did. One brother went with the mechanical valve. One brother went with the bio valve. He had a pig valve. Everything was, as smooth as open heart surgery can be. And honestly, I'm not sure if emergent open heart surgery is better or worse than a planned elective open heart surgery. It's a lot any way you look at it. My brother, who had the pig valve, a few months later also had pacing issues. He had a pacemaker go in. And unfortunately, he was struggling. Again, about 8 months post-op, he was actually in Atlanta, and he was in the ICU at Emory. And sort of a long story short, and I'm sharing this because I want everyone to know and realize how serious this can be. My brother got a fungal infection that settled on that bio valve. And, it starts to disintegrate, and he ended up having a deadly, fatal MI in the ICU at Emory, and he could not be saved. So, oftentimes I go back, as I've told my story over the years, I go back and forth because I don't know if my incident was a gift to my family or a curse to my family. So I kind of go back and forth with that quite a bit. The third brother has not had any surgeries done yet. He's being watched very, very closely. His blood pressure is being controlled with all the right medications. He, of course, is taking lots of notes from the experiences that I've had, the medications I've been on, the procedures I've had. And he's being watched, and he's being scanned regularly. So I guess it remains to be seen if and when he will have to have surgery. There's measurements that they take, of course, and depending on your body size, once you get to a certain measurement, or if you grow by a certain amount over a short period of time, they want to do some type of intervention. So I don't know if the remaining brother will have to face it or not, but he does have an aneurysm. So once this was all revealed, it was quite a lot for the 4 of us and my mom to digest, and my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, because, I really started to kind of build a family tree. I was referred to a geneticist at Hopkins in Baltimore, worked with them on developing sort of building a family tree, a medical family tree, if you will, just to kind of see how things were ending up in the family and trying to figure out if there were any other early cardiac events that caused death. But, the takeaway is I can show 3 generations in our family that suffers from aortic disease. So my goal really, as the mother of 3 children, and there are 11 children in that next level in my family, that next generation in my family, like a mother bear, I want to protect those kids as much as I can. So my kids, it was fairly easy because, again, I was established with a geneticist in Hopkins, and I think we're a pretty interesting study for Hopkins. And so my kids have been tracked and followed by Hopkins, over the past 8 years. Originally, they were scanned a little more frequently, and these are just echoes. So the kids go in, they put stickers on, various parts of their chest. I think there's 12. Then they put leads on. The kids just lie there. They have TV on, and they get tracings and pictures and images of the heart. And it's really important to establish a baseline. So again, at first, all 3 of my children, I want to say at maybe the first year, it was every 6 months. And then we've been able to wean it down. And now all of my kids are really considered adults. My youngest is 19, but they are still, it's still recommended that they be seen and get echoes every 2 years at this point. And knock on wood, we don't have any issues in my kids yet, or in the whole next generation. All of those kids, you know, they all live in different parts of the country, but everyone that was able to identify a cardiologist that, you know, was pretty intrigued by this, this, you know, family history of aortic disease. And so we have found that many cardiologists in the areas, again, geographic areas, have been willing to write orders to get this next generation of kids scanned. There have been a couple of hiccups with insurance over time. We have been able to work through it. So, you know, I would encourage any of you that have had a early cardiac event, death in your family, try to investigate it a little bit further. And, you know, really, you just have to learn more about it. You have to learn what some of the signs and symptoms are. You have to learn, you know, it's just so much about education, which is really the platform for Think Aorta, Think Family. It's more than just educating our physicians and our clinicians, but each other. You know, if someone in your family died at a young age and then you all of a sudden, you know, you have an aneurysm as well, do the legwork. Talk to your physicians, talk to people in your community, use Aortic Hope and Think Aorta as resources in terms of how to navigate this and what the protocols should be for you moving forward and for any offspring that you have or siblings. It can be, you know, a very devastating diagnosis for all of us. I was very lucky. I recovered extremely well. I have pacing issues. I actually had to have a cardioversion about 10 days ago. So my heart is kind of starting to talk a little bit again, but we were able to stabilize it. So it's just my path, it's my story, and I am just constantly, you know, just urging my generation, my siblings, and the next generation, you know, to stay on top of it. You know, I'm not always going to be able to manage everyone, especially as those next 11 kids move on to adulthood, and certainly some of the women might go on to have pregnancies, and there's a whole nother, you know, layer of stuff that they need to be aware of if they do become pregnant and there's aortic disease in the family. Again, just give some thought to your history. If you need to kind of build a family tree, do that. There are places, again, sort of in the Baltimore area that does genetic testing. The genetic testing can be a little frustrating, though. My genetic testing came back as inconclusive, but obviously there's something, you know, very real happening in my family. It just isn't named yet. So also, you know, the more of us in the community that participate in genetic testing, the bigger the pool is, so that they can start to identify more and more of the genes that can cause this aortic disease. So I would encourage you to, again, use us as resources. We can give you direction, those of you that have been through it before, and just gather information. Don't be afraid to get the information and share it with your family. My family, everyone was pretty willing to get more information. I didn't really have any problems convincing my siblings or that next generation of kids to get things checked out. So I didn't have to struggle with that. The only roadblocks we've had is with insurance companies. So in a nutshell, that's it. I wish everyone good health, and please just continue to be educated for yourself. And, you know, even things are changing for those of us that are survivors in the community. From time to time, medications are changing in terms of which ones are the best to manage our current condition. So just stay educated, stay informed. Knowledge is power. Protect the people you love, and just, you know, do the right thing. And as I mentioned before, we are here to be a resource for you. Karin Anderson myself, there's a whole crew of us that are more than happy to talk more about our stories and give you directions. So I'm Karin Bertozzi. I'm a survivor of aortic dissection, and thank you for listening this afternoon.